Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Calyx Crew Podcast. We've got a very notorious guest today, none other than the man himself, Terpene, is on the show. How you doing, Terp?
What's going on, dog? I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. This was actually a reschedule. We had scheduled this in February, and I had some surgery and some other stuff that I had to deal with. So thank you so much for putting up with me and having me back,
No
and
problem.
we worked it out. And thank you.
I'm glad that we finally got you on here, man. What you smoking on? I see you lighting something up over there.
So this is Chiquita Berries.
Ooh.
It was originally a Chiquita OG a Chiquita bananas cut crossed to it was some sort of like cookie berries. It's from a 209 Stone City Genetics. And I went into it looking for something banana, and I found anything but. It was burnt match heads. It's bad perm. Like just the complete opposite, but in the best way. Like, I went in looking for one thing, and what I found wasn't that, but it was so much better. I didn't go into it looking for something kind of on that funky, really almost burnt, nasty end, but it's so awesome, and it kicks really good.
Would it be fair to say that you're kind of into those offensive terpenes?
Oh, we can have a whole discussion about the poopene fetish. This has become a very hot discussion topic lately. We've probably discussed it on 6 or 8 different podcasts. The growing fetish of describing just how nasty and foul and odoriferous your weed is, and just that's become a whole subculture now of the more spoiled, rancid, rank, the better, And it's becoming a new thing of just, there's a whole subculture of people that hit me up and is just like, what's the nasty? You got anything that smells like an old diaper that's been out for 2 weeks? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I got something for you, man. Like, well, they don't call me terpene for nothing. We'll definitely put you with a flavor. But that's become like, it kind of became one of those things, like we all kind of do it a little bit. And then we started talking about the fact that we all do it a lot. And we're like, yeah, I'm looking for that, like, burnt perm wrapped in hair with some skunk and, a baby diaper. And it's just the descriptions and the descriptors of rancid weed has become a whole subculture lately.
I think a big part of that is the shock value attached to it. Like,
right.
If I say, hey, I've got something that's super blueberry terpene, you're going to be like, okay, there's a lot of blueberry.
Right.
But if I'm like, okay, well, you know what? You got your roadkill skunk, you got your tennis ball and everything, but I've got this Pakistani chocolate tie that's fucking tastes like you're sucking on the wet stuff that's at the bottom of your garbage trash. Right. You're going to be like, oh, it's the shock value. It's what
a lot of it has been,
and a lot of other artists.
A lot of it's kind of been on the back of like a lot of the chem strains I found, like as those of GMO and stuff like that, as those kind of strains have become more popular, you're starting to see a lot more of like savory, stuff that's not just simple fruit terps, right? And the people that love it. I mean, love it. But there's a lot of people that go, I don't know if I want my weed to smell like diarrhea. And the truth is, it's a niche. That's why I kind of call it the poopene fetish, is it is very much a niche thing. And the people that love those funky, nasty terps, that's what they're looking for. They're almost the sort of people that don't want fruity weed. You have to appreciate that. Everybody's got a flavor. Everybody's got a kink. Everybody's got something that they're really into, So it's like, I've always said my whole thing from minute one was to try and cover all the bases. So anybody that hit me up and said, I want a flavor, I got something for you. And it really doesn't matter what corner or niche of the weed market you're into, or I try to focus on a little bit of something across the board. So any customer that hits me up and says, hey, I need a gassy strain, I need a fruity strain, I need a strain that's just terps beyond anything anybody's seen, I got you.
Okay, let me get personal with you. You've got something for everybody. What's for terpene?
See, that's where it comes from, man. So it comes from I have tolerance issues. I've been smoking for a little while. So there's a little bit of, The thing that I found to deal with that the best is to constantly keep a different strain on deck. So
Yeah.
I have real bad ADD with any strain in that I'll smoke it and then 15 minutes later, it was the greatest thing I ever had, but I'm over it now. And so a lot of it comes from just my desire and my need to find stronger strains, to find strains that fit particular niches, and anything that'll kick through that tolerance issue of like, look, man, I'm traditionally a dabber. Like 90% of the time, I'm smoking hash. I found it kind of easier to smoke flower on podcasts. So like, it's one of those things that, I'll puff a couple joints. But yeah, I mean, really, in my pursuit of flower, it's always been flavor, unique, and something that'll cut through, something that's going to get, past everything else. And that's usually the jar I grab. It's tough to say what my
Can you
favorite
explain
flavor
that a
is.
little bit more?
Which
The
part?
cut through. What do you
Oh,
mean?
so yeah, so like I'm just saying, like I'm looking for a strain that if I have 8 jars on the table, that's the one that's gonna kick me the hardest. So that's the
Okay.
one I'm gonna grab. Like I always say, it's the jar that
Something that
goes empty
breaks that
first.
potency barrier.
Yep, yep.
Gotcha.
And see, the big problem that we have, one of the big problems that I feel like we have in cannabis right now is kind of the misconception that high THC is the best, and that's it. So when you walk
Yeah.
into a dispensary, when you're buying weed, it's just what's the THC content? That is not the best way to buy weed. And quite simply because the highest THC isn't always going to be the one that gets you the highest. I know that sounds
Amen.
funny because your immediate thought is 18% is not going to get me as high as 30% weed. The truth is 18% with high myrcene levels will get you higher than 30% weed. And I know that sounds funny, but we have a ton of discussions all the time about ancillary terpenes, about terpenes in general, and how they modulate, specifically myrcene. And we've known for years and years, myrcene helps THC cross the blood-brain barrier. So that's why for years you heard the joke about eat some mangoes or chew on some peppercorns. You ever chewed on peppercorn? That's hardcore, bro.
Isn't that a heavier
So
cariophylline? Or is there a significant amount of
there's
myrcene?
also significant amounts of myrcene. And so with those higher elevated, and that's generally why myrcene in most of my strains, I like that to be the first terpene on the list, the one that has the most terps of all the others, because quite simply, you're going to get higher. Now, what I've seen this from is I'll take strains that are 18, 20%, but with higher myrcene levels, and I'll have people come back and say, I can't smoke that. Like I've had people literally tell me, like, my customers are afraid of the blackout truffle just simply because it's a higher myrcene strain, 20% plus THC. So no slouch, but it's like 30% THC usually comes at the sake of sacrificing terps. Like there's only so much room in a trichome.
Amen.
So if in that trichome, the predominant oil is THC, the predominant chemical is THC, there's less room for other stuff. And so there will always be a market for high THC strains. Like that's just, it's the marketability. It's easy to sell. Your average customer says THC, yeah. But as we go down the line more and more, we start to realize that heavy terps and the right terp blends matter a lot more than 30% terps. I mean, 30% THC. And so that's why I say, for me, as much as I love flavors and I love different flavors and I love, for me, it's the variety. For me, it's the chase. For me, it's what haven't I seen yet? Because I've seen some awesome strains, through 20 years plus of popping seeds. Like I've seen the evolution of weed as we know it. I started growing in the late 90s. To be honest, there weren't a ton of options back then.
No.
Your options were either Mark Emery's catalog, Amsterdam, maybe go to Canada. I mean, that was about it.
In general, there wasn't nearly the flood of
Right.
genetic diversity that we have today. And then not only that, but the problems that we encountered trying to acquire genetics or even having them in our area limited that pool even more, for
Right.
sure. And that's something that we were talking about the other day is some of those old strains, you get a nice Panama Red or something like that that's only testing, 15 to 18%. that's not what it is. It's the cannabinoid profile, and it's how those cannabinoids interact with each other to give you that high. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing that we're seeing kind of now, so back in the 90s when I started growing, there were still a lot of those very basic profile strains. So it was either piney or it was skunky or it was berry. But back then it was kind of rare that you would hit a strain and you'd go, man, there's so much going on here. I can't really describe all of this. And in the world of polyhybrids, in the world of, everybody with a closet can be a breeder and can make their own seeds. We're really now seeing the true diversity of the gene pool,
Oh yeah.
because there's more people breeding now, more people growing weed than at any point in history. The sheer amount of weed that's being grown because it's done legally in so many places now is far surpassing anything we've ever seen. And the beautiful part of that is we're seeing the expansion of the gene pool at such a rate that it's really tough to tell you what tomorrow holds. In the simple fact that we're also seeing, along with all these polyhybrids and all these, multi crosses, we're also seeing so many people going back to some of the older stuff. You're seeing people reworking old stuff. You're seeing people who bust open seed collections after 10, 15 years and really just start to pull out stuff that, it meant something to them. They collected it. But the tragedy of that is, we keep getting into this discussion about, without kicking up a bunch of mud, skunk, for instance. Skunk's one of those profiles that everybody talks about. It's gone. It's gone. We lost all the good skunk. We lost all the good skunk. Well, why? Like, why do you think that's the case? And the answer is usually because those older plants didn't adapt as well to indoor cultivation. They were specifically bred in whatever region they came from, largely, to be outdoor plants grown in specific environments. And as everything moved indoors, plants that didn't keep up, plants that hermed too much, with skunk particularly, plants that grew 20 feet tall and didn't really yield all that much weight, those plants didn't make it long term. And so that's why I tell people all the time, what's really important is, if you love a plant, make more seeds of it. Find a way to make more seeds, because that guarantees that whatever profile you love, whatever plant you're in love with, makes it to another generation, and it can be tomorrow's favorite strain too. We don't have to get there and be like, you remember that one strain in the day? I wish we'd have kept it. You can do that. Find two seeds and breed them. Find your two favorite strains and breed them together. You'd really be surprised, man. And that's what makes sure that those favorite strains that you loved from yesteryear make it onto the next generation and make it, to somebody else to talk about down the road.
Doesn't take much work to do a preservation effort, and it's something that's extremely important, especially for the future of cannabis. I remember talking to a Patreon member just like yesterday, I think it was, about how back when I started smoking, almost everything tasted like pine, like heavy pinene or heavy myrcene. There wasn't a lot of genetic diversity. Maybe when we started getting some orange bud up from Cali or from Nevada, but almost everything tasted the same, but it had kind of a different look, or it was a little bit heavier in this terpene than the other one. But about the time of like White Widow, White Rhino, BC Bud, and all that, Northern Lights, like that's mainly what it was.
Right.
But I think an important thing to note, like you were saying, the genetic diversity that we have all these terpenes that you just don't find in cannabis showing up more and more often. The more breeders that are out there, the more people that are breeding towards these different traits than we've ever seen before. Not only that, but like when I did the Egyptian land race, this Sinai, I always say Sinai, I say it fucked up, but that was one that was very heavy in granule. And granule, I was looking at because it was apparently the terpene that was responsible for like stone fruit and peach flavors. But that terpene doesn't just express as peach, it can express a
Absolutely.
multitude of ways along that spectrum. And that's not just that one terpene, that's fuck, how many is there? I don't even know.
Right. So kind of what you're knocking on here kind of goes back a little bit to what we were talking about. In the kind of the early to mid 90s, as you started to see more breeding specifically in cannabis, right? It was generally for high THC. They were largely breeding for heavy trichomes, heavy resin. But at that time, most people weren't breeding for terpenes. So, in that push to breed higher THC and higher THC strains, you generally phased out so many ancillary terpenes, so many of those terpenes that maybe only appear in smaller amounts. And so, as we're seeing now, the other thing that we see now is the rise in testing. So we now have more access to testing, terpene testing, cannabinoid testing than we've ever had before. It's still not perfect. Like you as a person on the street can't really just take 100 samples and send them to a lab and get terp tests. But all of the dispensaries, all the legal entities that are running grows right now all have access to testing of some sort. So what that's doing is we're starting to see all of these strains that we've had for years and years and years being run out, documented with test results, right? And now we're starting to see that there are other terpenes there that we weren't even paying attention to. And whether it's a concerted effort to actually breed for specific terp flavors, or it's just an effort to, we're not as concerned with high THC now, we're willing to breed for other things like flavor and for, other content other than just THC. So with so many breeders, you might have a favorite flavor and it might be some strain that's really high in some unique or odd terpene, and I say really high in comparison, right? Some of these terps that you're mentioning, and especially some of the ancillary terps that are kind of there in smaller amounts, when I see these terp wheels and it's like, this terp smells like, lavender, and this terp smells like, it's so tough because in that trichome is a soup of different terpenes, thiols of there's all kinds of flavor molecules. We still don't know what all's there
Yeah.
because the best labs are only testing for terpenes and cannabinoids. Most of them aren't testing, I haven't seen at least, full spectrum tests of everything that's in that resin, that's in the trichome. And that's the real kick right now is we keep bringing up, every time we talk about terps, somebody brings up gas. Somebody brings up gassy terps and thiols and skunky terps and thiols. We still don't know what all is there.
Yeah.
Because it's not something you can really just call up a lab and say, hey, I want to test for thiols in my cannabis. Most places don't do that. That's not to say they can't, but I've never seen a full write up of every single thing that's in cannabis resin. So it's like we're still only seeing a small piece of the picture. We're seeing the part that we're looking at, and there's still so many other things going on there that we still don't really, we're either not capable of testing for or we just don't understand.
I think that's a big thing about, it's not federally legal, so there's not as much testing that
Right.
we can do on it. But I'm really glad that you brought that up because you're right. There is so many terpenes that we know of already. I don't remember how many anymore. Is it right under 200, something like that?
But the
But
other
not
side to it is it's all commercial based. So it's like all of the testing that's generally happening happens for one of two reasons: state regulations or marketing curiosity, right? And that's kind of all of the cannabis testing that happens. You have to test for things like pesticides and THC in some states. Some states require terpene testing, some don't. But the truth is, those are all done because it's not in a scientific method. It's not because we're just curious about what all's here and we just want to look and see, or, it's just, that's not why it's done. It's all literally done to either pass inspections or because you can use it to market and say, oh, well, we have, high terps in this and high terps, but most terpene testing is it's not done as in an exploratory way. You know what I'm saying? It's not, can we figure out what all is here? It's just give me something I can use to market my strain better when I put it on a shelf to somebody.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought that up, though. Like, I was going to say, not only like we talked about, can one terpene express, variety of different smells. But how it interacts with other terpenes as well is going to change that profile. So I might inbred line this granule terpene within my heritage so much where everything's expressing peach. But the minute it comes in contact with a new terpene that's not used to is really going to change that profile to where it doesn't express exactly peach anymore, right?
Right.
Pretty amazing. Jesse Hartley wants to know, in terms of, say, oh, guys, if you have questions, throw them back up. I fucked up the Q&A. But he wanted to know if you had any problem F2ing seeds. If he F2'd seeds of...
Oh, no. And I'm kind of glad this came up, because this is probably one of my 3 or 4 favorite topics to talk about. So I'm a firm believer in open source genetics. If you purchase a pack of seeds, those seeds are yours to do as you please. If there's male plants there and there's female plants there, you paid for those plants. Those plants belong to you, and how you use them is up to you. If that means you F2 and sell them, that means you F2 them and give them away to everybody on the planet, it's your prerogative, man. I'm a firm believer that if you're selling regular sex seeds, you paid for all of those seeds. They belong to you. And what you want to do with them, I have no control over. I always tell people, I always appreciate a pack if you shoot me a pack, just so I can throw it in the bin and I have a pack, but it's not required. And it's one of those things that I tell other people, ask your breeder that question and see how many of them tell you, I got no problem with it. Because there's a lot of people in the seed industry that will get super angry about that, will throw fits. I had an old man try to swing on me once, and it's the funniest, the ego and the amount of like, it's mine, I'm going to control it. You sold it to somebody. And
why are you trying to fight nature?
10 seeds. They paid for all 10 of them.
Yeah, it's theirs.
There was nothing on that pack that said you got to throw half of these in the garbage. And it's the truth is, we all eat well. It doesn't take $1 out of my pocket. If you sell F2s of my seeds, people know that I made the original. And if they want the next generation, they're going to come to me. And the reality is, I can't control it anyway. So why would I get angry to the point where I want to fight somebody or yell at people online? I've seen so much over, people F2 and seeds and then getting their feelings hurt. And the truth is, a lot of the people that get mad about that paid stupid money for their cuts because they're usually suckers. And that's why they get so in their feelings about it, because they've paid a premium to have the cut or the only cut, or, and I don't really work with cuts. I've never paid anybody a significant amount of money for cuts. Like, I bought cuts at a dispensary once years and years back, but like, I've never paid somebody thousands of dollars for a cut of weed, nor would I. I'll just wait until you cross it and then get those and make my own seeds.
Right.
I hate to say it, man, but like, I believe firmly in open source genetics. I believe that, you buy them from the person that made them because you love them. And then what you do with them is you. I mean, that's, I'm not in every grow, so I can't do anything about it, even if you did. But I fully support people that do. I always joke, these are all just crayons. And my biggest desire is that one day somebody takes one of my crayons and paints a masterpiece. And in that, we can all share. There's so much to go around. There's no lack of genetics. If you really think one cut is the end-all, be-all cut, pop some more seeds. Because there's other stuff out there. There's better stuff out there. Every time somebody shows me the cut to end all cuts, I just go, I hope you didn't pay a lot for it, man. There's just better stuff out there. And it's not, there's so much, like I said, there's so much ego in like, do you have the cut? Is that the cut from such and such. Like, are you sure that's the only cut? Can you verify that that's the? I don't care. I don't care. I don't care to even have that discussion. Like, I would rather make my own something amazing and sell it to you as something amazing than just rip off something somebody else is doing and just say, man, I chased down this one cut, I paid $5,000 for it, and now I'm going to pimp it out as hard as I can. It's not my thing. I'm kind of old school. I like seeds. Like I said, when I came up, there weren't a lot available to me. So once I could make them, I literally just thought of myself as like Johnny Appleseed. Like, I just want to make all the flavors, and I want to try all the flavors, and I want to spread them as far as I can. And so I've always tried to keep my genetics affordable. We do tons of giveaways and freebies and, like, ways for people to get tons of good genetics for reasonable prices. And so many people now, they just assume because it's an expensive pack of seeds, it's a great pack of seeds. And I've popped them all, man. Like, I've popped your $600, $700, $800 packs of seeds, and I've popped the stuff out of Joe's closet. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to go with the closet guy. There's only 1 or 2 people at that top echelon of price that I would spend my money again. And, let's be honest, like, most great genetics shouldn't be expensive. Unless you're, like I said, you're paying 10 grand for a cut. Why? Like, seeds.
Let's throw a range on this. What do you think is an acceptable and moral price for a pack of seeds? Minimum to max.
If we're talking about anything under an F5, right? $100.
Is that max?
Yeah, $100 is the top end of what and this is as a buyer. Listen, man, this is as a buyer. I'm not necessarily saying this as somebody who eats off of seeds. I'm saying this as somebody who spent 20 years collecting. 20 years collecting, 20 years hoarding my own flavors and my own seeds. And so for me, if I'm buying seeds and it's over $100 a pack, it better be something that I can't live without, which is real rare for me. Like I said, I don't get attached to strains. So, like, there's nothing I've ever had that I wouldn't just say, I'll find another one.
Right.
I found this one, and so if we're talking about something F5 or higher, then we get into, like, how big is the breeder? How well known is the breeder? How well known is the pedigree of the genetics that we're talking about? If this is some stuff that they've been growing in Northern California for 40 years, then you can usually guess that this is of a pedigree that's a little bit higher genetically than just a cross somebody did in their closet. Like, it just depends on what we're talking about. But anything under an F5, I'd have a hard time paying crazy money for. Now, there's 2 brands that I would kind of make an exception there. They're both kind of legacy brands out of California, and they're on the kind of the upper end. And I would buy their seeds again in a minute. Let's be honest, man. Aficionado and Dying Breed are the only 2 companies that I would 100% vouch for. Every seed that I've popped was worth every nickel that went into it. I've been in a weird position, like just having an Instagram page, and I had people hit me up and just go, man, I got all these seeds and we went to a cup and we spent a bunch of money and now I'm scared to pop them because they're so expensive. I feel like I'm just going to screw it up, and it's like, so I had people come to me and like trade me my seeds for stuff that they had picked up at cups and couldn't bring themselves to run. And so I had stuff kind of fall in my lap at one time. And I was just like, I'm going to run it all and see what's worth running, what's garbage, what's, I'll never touch again. And in that price range, there's a couple other brands that, I won't talk negative on anybody. But there's a couple other brands that I would say are maybe not worth spending that kind of money on unless it's just something you can't live without.
And you're allowed to have your opinions, man.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you don't know what you're buying, right? If we're just talking about the average seed buyer who sees a $300 to $500 pack and goes, is that worth my money? Do the research really heavily at that point. You know, it's one thing if you buy a $60, $70 pack of seeds and you got 10 shots to find a winner, and let's say nothing comes of it. That's a whole lot different than when you've invested $500 a pack and now every seed needs to be a winner in your eyes, right? You don't have the margin of error because you've invested so much. And I'm talking about your average seed buyer. I'm not talking about the guy that's got 180,000 square foot and an unlimited seed budget.
Right.
You know, I'm talking about your average collector they've been in it for a little while, here's these big name brands, and then goes, what's expensive? It's got to be good. You know, why would they charge so much for it? Well, because they can. That's the only reason. Like, those genetics aren't super special. Nobody's ever had them. You know, like, once again, that goes back to the open source nature of genetics.
I got in a ton of shit several years ago when I was talking to two different breeders. One of them you actually named, and we were talking about that cap that I just asked you about and what's morally and ethically right to charge for a pack of seeds. And we were talking about, there was a couple packs that a breeder had put up, but they were asking thousands of dollars for 10 seeds. And I said, it's not worth it.
It's a gamble.
And I had another breeder that was involved with that breeder hit me up, really go on the defense right away and say, well, you don't know what you're fucking talking about. These are, have been held for so many generations and everything. I said, at the end of the day, what's going to come out of that is a plant, albeit maybe an extremely inbred, well-worked, beautiful plant. It is still a plant. And I can't see it being worth it at the end of the day.
Let's be honest, okay? Deep filial inbreeding is only good for breeders.
Right.
So as a grower, I would never pay that money for that. Ever.
Exactly.
As a breeder, and that's why I get back to, if I'm paying you that kind of money, I'm paying you for the fact that you're selling legacy strains, you're selling pedigree genetics, and I am going to use them to breed with. Because that's the only reason somebody would pay that kind of money for those names. As a grower, it's irrelevant. Like, there's so many hype strains out right now that, like, and it's been a couple of years, I feel like, since we've had like a really big, this is the hype strain everybody has to have. I don't know if it's a little post-pandemic lull. High Times hasn't been doing as many events to tell people.
I think people are niching out more, especially, with you, me, everybody kind of moving towards Discord. All right, Instagram's shoving us off. They're canceling us out. YouTube's taking down channels. Like, Discord I think it's the future. And I think people are going to niche out like that because I don't have to follow a page of bullshit and scroll through trying to find Terpenes post today. I can just go to Terpenes Discord and check all that out. I don't have to just choose Terpene. I can choose Terpene. I can choose, Calyx and Crew Podcast or whoever I follow and have multiple Discord accounts that I can pop between and find exactly what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
And I think that's important to note right now. But like you said as well, sadly, from a grower's perspective, I think a lot of people nowadays, like the hype boycott keeping guys, are doing that. Like you said, equating this is a high price, this is going to be good for me, or this is going to be something extremely special. And usually I find that those people are basing more how much money can I make off of finding a really good one and selling cuts of it than keeping it for myself.
The truth is, man, that if we've run enough seeds, if we've all run enough strains, you've seen the most amazing top tier of weed. Let's be honest, dank weed is dank weed. Like, at the best top point of cultivation. Then it all comes down to flavor. There's so much frosty weed and it's beautiful and it's just gorgeous nugs. But what does it taste like? That's what really has become the deciding factor. And I think that's why we're seeing so many little niches, right? Is that it comes down to flavor and taste. And people come to realize, well, it's like hype doesn't always mean it's the best. Hype usually meant it looked pretty in a picture and somebody posted it on the internet and somebody else went, I got to have that, or somebody in a marketing company at one of these large brands has essentially said, now we're pushing out XYZ strain. We're going to have our rapper rap about it. We're going to have our marketing team hit every social media hard with it. It's going to be the next thing everybody's talking about. That's usually what we're talking about there is branding and marketing more than just the most amazing strain of weed.
Yeah.
Usually, don't get me wrong, they're usually gorgeous. But if you sit down with 10 of the greatest growers in this country, right, every one of them have frosty, dank nugs. The one that's going to walk up from that table and walk away being the one that knew they had the dank was the one whose jar stank the most. Because we all have jars of stank. Like any great grower has jars of stinky weed. But the one that's going to get everybody is that flavor that makes all the OGs go, what is that? I got
That's
to
true.
have
Exactly.
that. The jar that goes the fastest. That's how we always joked about it. If we all sat down and threw our jars in the middle of the table and you could smoke anything you wanted all day long, the jar that empties the fastest is going to be the best one. And that's almost
Hey,
never just the most resinous one. It's always the dankest flavor.
Patreon member Dank Panda wants to know, I have a pineapple meatball F2 and veg that smells of rank feet and vomit. Will it hold or get more putrid and flour?
So if you haven't gotten the pineapple flavor on that yet, so some of those kind of go both ways. There's kind of a funky poupine. I heard people say Italian meatballs. It's really weird and savory meat. And then there's some that have more pineapple, and then there's some that kind of have both. It sounds like you've got the more meat breath leaning pheno. And yeah, I would expect that one to make your friends kind of run. Like that one, you bust that one out in the car, and somebody's gonna think they shit themselves. Yeah, and once again, man, like that. In my selections, I'm not sure. You said F2. When I did the F2s and the F3s, my goal was to work with plants that exhibited kind of an even mix because I think that strain really shines when it's got both the kind of funky rancid stuff, but it's also got this candy pineapple thing on the top. And it really does kind of remind you of like a burnt ham with pineapple rinds on it or something. Like it's really unique and meaty. But my favorite ones are kind of an even blend of the two. I've also selected in that line away from what I like to call the mutant leaf phenos of meat breath. Um, you can usually tell them about a couple weeks into veg, all the leaves just throw this ugly mutation, and you just go, "What's wrong with this?" And it really just is a leaf mutation. But I found those plants don't tend to be as vigorous as profile typical as I like. Those tend to have just a boring, cushy profile. As much as I love Kush, like that wasn't my goal with that line. That line in general, all those pineapple sorbet crosses just unbelievably complex and unique. And that meatball, yeah, you're probably stuck with the funk on that one. I hope that's what you like. If you need to, we're gonna start a group, essentially, a support group. We'll figure out where. We'll just call it Poopenes Anonymous or Poopene Fetish Anonymous, and we'll just have a forum where people can kind of talk dirty to each other about the rank of their weed and whether they can argue about whether it smells like feed or bad
You can have
bo
little
or,
sub threads, garlic.
there really needs to be a place for these people to gather. That guy seemed like he might have had a little bit of it and been looking for a place to find other like-minded pooping heavy individuals.
I've got an appreciation for a little bit of everything. I do love my poopings. I love some nasty shit. I just feel like those ones, whatever is going on with a lot of those style heavy ones, just get my head right. That high is the high that I typically look for. Not always, but in general. Another one is Dynasty Genetics. I grow a lot of their gear, and he mostly does like sweeter berry stuff, you know. But yours is one that I've definitely been looking at as well. I've never grown any of your genetics, but I really want to.
I'll send you
It's
some
very.
seeds.
You already sent me some seeds.
Oh, okay. I was
I
going to
mean,
say,
I'm giving them to other people, but
if you don't have any, I'll send you some seeds to run, man.
I'd be more
Anytime.
than happy to pay
Yeah,
for it,
anytime.
man. That is morally and ethically correct. I've gotten seeds from breeders before, but I always offer to pay, and I still do. Even I'd never have to pay for seeds from a lot of these people. I could just ask for them, but I still pay for them just because I think that's important. If you got a homie that has a business like that, you don't have like I have one friend that started up a restaurant. It's like a 5-star restaurant. It's big money. Like to go in there, it's going to be an expensive meal.
Yeah.
But I'm still going to go in there and I'm still going to spend money. I'm not going to expect a free meal because this is my friend and I want to support them, And I think that's what's important with a
And then
lot
we're
of this.
still, even like how many times that's happened to us, and we go in and then the friend still comps the meal. You better
Yeah.
tip that waitress 20% on top of what the meal was going to cost. And that lady just had the best night of her life. Like, you better still leave that money in that business, because that's the truth of it, is that, so much of us that run businesses on our own, it's so much bigger than any one facet, right? You have to be the marketing team, and you have to be the grow, and you have to do it all yourself. And especially in this business, the ones that are still doing it now, even people that love it, because the 2020 boom came, everybody had those stimulus checks. It was easy to be a seed vendor for a year and a half there, and lots of people made money. But the last year and a half, man, it separated a lot of those people that were just here for a quick buck. So many of those quick seed banks folded, and that's the business. I've seen so many of these bust and booms, to the point where it's like it's not uncommon for people right now to not be in this industry in a year and a half. It's easy to do
Yeah.
weed for a year and a half. It's a lot tougher to do it for 15, 20 years plus, because you have to change with the market. You have to realize that the market is changing. If you were selling flower 14, 15, 16, you had a hard realization. The market changed drastically. When all these huge legal grows came online in legal states, the flower market changed probably irreparably at this point. Like, I don't know if we'll ever see some of the high water marks of what people were getting for flower there. And it's like, so many people have shifted now into seeds, because once again, there's still reasonable money if you know how to market yourself. But yeah, it's you got to love it. You have
Hopefully
to
with
love it.
legalization, there's still a market for craft cannabis. I think that's really important. Just if we're going to compare different drugs, then we should be comparing this to alcohol. If that's how you're trying to regulate it, then we should compare it to that. And there's still a niche for those craft
Yep,
market.
absolutely.
Um, and at the end of the day, with more people getting into cannabis, um, you're not going to see that big money rush. It's just like any other industry. When it starts up, when it's limited, there's big money in it. After a while, you're going to notice it's still agriculture, you know?
Farming.
Agriculture stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's farming. That's what nobody tells anybody that gets in the weed industry. Nobody ever straight tells you
Yeah.
it's
You're going to be a
farming.
farmer.
It's a farming. It's indoor farming, which is very unnatural. Like, for 90% of the people who aren't growing in, open fields, which I don't see too many commercial grows like that. Yeah, it's unnatural. And we're trying to play God, and we're trying to create, environments that are perfect, and we're trying to, and I don't know, man. I keep saying that every business that's in business right now, as soon as it goes federally legal, within 3 years, will get bought out by a bigger company. And once again, all these people will be pushed out of the industry, who are largely just here to make a quick buck. Funny enough, it's been decades since weed was a quick buck. If you were growing in the late 90s or early 2000s, and you were brave and you had a decent sized black market grow, you were probably eating okay. but the overhead and, it's always been a tough business. And the notion that you're just going to make a bunch of quick, fast money, like I've seen people make decent money just moving packs, like just middlemen. But like I've never known an intensely wealthy grower. Like even the people that run most of these large cannabis companies aren't weed people. They're people who made money in real estate, who made money in some other facet. They've got investors. Like most of them aren't people that spent their lives in a cannabis grow. And most of those people are still just growing on their own because there's really no money working in another person's grow, making, what amounts to, for some people, a McDonald's manager's salary or less. Like they're not throwing tons of money at great growers. And that's why you've got so much mediocre weed in dispensaries, is because it's grown by a coterie of who just got off the bus. 22, 23-year-old kids who just love weed, and they will work for nothing just to tell their family back home they're working in a weed grow. Little do they know that job only lasts about 6 months to a year, because once a year they do cyclical firing, get rid of everybody there, and bring in the next set of 20-year-old kids who can do it for less money than you just did.
Pretty
That's
sad.
why all the weed and if you want a quick fast on why all the weed and dispo sucks, that's it right there.
Before we move on to some more questions, I wanted to ask you, you said you started growing in the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s?
Late
Late
90s.
90s. Okay. What was some of those first types that you were growing?
So
Or
the
can name?
first handful of plants that I ever grew were bag seed,
Okay.
and so you kind of mentioned before we started about chatting about some things that kind of was into. So at about 16, 15, 16, I did my first fish show, fall 97.
Okay.
From then, like that opened my eyes in a huge way to weed in general, because I had, so much more access. And so occasionally you just get some great weed with just a sprig nugget here, or just a seed here or there, kind of set those aside. And once we finally got to a point where we were like, let's just try it. Let's just throw some plants in the woods and let's just give it a go. I had some, I don't even, honestly, probably didn't even know what it was. It was bag seed from Fish Tour of some sort. And then at some point, I got onto probably IC Mag was the first forum where I reached out. Like I spent a lot of time lurking on early overgrow. We had a computer in our house in like the late 80s. So like I saw the entirety of the internet bloom and blossom.
Yep.
And so as, overgrow became a thing and then got shut down, I did a lot of lurking there. Probably picked up my first BHO tech there. Tons of, subcool super soil stuff, and, stuff that honest to God was so valuable in just teaching me.
Yeah.
Because back then I felt like everybody wasn't an expert. That's been my big beef with like forums for a while. I always joke it's just experts telling experts how to be experts now. Nobody's ever just like, I'm learning something. Like I'm here to learn. A lot of it is just everybody wants a boss and say, no, that's not right. You're absolutely wrong. That's not the way to do it. And so for a long time, I just lurked on these forums and sucked up as much as I could. And I think it was around IC Mag, probably in the early 2000s, the 2000, 2001, 2002, that I finally reached out and was just like, hey, look, I got these seeds that I've kind of played around with on my own and I can trade them for something else. And I started trading with people. And that was probably the very beginnings of just getting my hands on stuff. Now, some of my favorite stuff from back then, there was a Haze #1 cross cut that came around, or a flower that came around really heavily, that was through one of my good buddies, that was super unique, and really gave me like kind of the essence of what haze was. There's so little haze these days that like it was one of those like perfect, very typical samples. As far as stuff that I grew early on that I just absolutely loved, I had a double purple Doja mental floss from a cat called like Outlaw Grower, Outlaw Breeder maybe, from the Seed Bay
Okay.
days, that I fell in love with. Deep Chunk is one of the first strains that like really hooked me, got me into Kush, got me really into like heavy medicinal myrcene heavy strains. And then I run a Deep Congo, which was another, odd, beautiful sativa indica pairing. It was a one that I got from across from a friend online. But that just, it was my first forays into kind of digging into what's out there. Now, it really wasn't until, probably 2010 and later that I really had a super access to just anything, and really got a full taste of everything that was out there, spending years in Colorado, just with access to every dispensary and everything you could have access to, working in, tons of commercial facilities, running most of the gear that they ran. When you work in a facility, cuts tend to make it into everybody's grow. So you're all growing whatever the grow grows. And so through that, man, I had finally access to just all of the flavors. And it was literally like a kid in a candy store, because I finally had, for so many years, it was just whatever came by. You might get weed from your buddy, or he might have two different kinds. If you were like me, you were on tour, you might run into 4 or 5 people with a cup. But it was kind of uncommon to get a selection, to get 8 or 10 different kinds of weed and all of them be unique. And it wasn't really until I started growing my own heavily and getting access to other seeds and just popping whatever I could get my hands on that I finally got to that point where I'm like, I still don't think I know everything that's there, but I have a much better understanding now of the possibilities. Because so many of those earlier strains, like I said, were so one note that now we're seeing these beautiful combinations of different things and different flavors in different ways. It's just unprecedented.
So when did the switch occur between growing and deciding I'm gonna breed my first plant?
They weren't far behind. But back then, it was purely necessity. Like, it wasn't with the air of, I'm going to one day be selling seeds. I wish I had that sort of foresight, because it wasn't until maybe 2015, 2016 that I really went at breeding as a full-time thing and as a passion and as something that, I wanted to work on wholeheartedly. I'd always just been a grower, and I bred in little small projects on my own, largely because, like I said, it was 2 strains that I loved, or it was something I knew I was going to lose for some reason or couldn't keep up with, had to shut a grow, whatever the situation was. And so it was back then, it was more of just a necessity. I didn't have access to all the genetics that I have access to today. And so it was just kind of one of those things where, if I had 2 strains that I loved, I'd breed them together so that I had something. And when I started breeding full time, I had some of these projects that I had worked on. But to be honest, it wasn't ever at that point with an eye towards, I have a goal. Like, I want to breed a strain with flavor, or I have it was almost always just 2 strains. I love both these strains. I want to make another strain that's, a cross of these and keep them around. Or if I had access to F1, enough seeds, I'd do an F2. But yeah, back then, especially when it was just, stuff that I had gotten off of forums or stuff that I had worked with, just here and there, those were just, I wanted to try other stuff, because I didn't have this great access. I mean, I'm from the East Coast. We had whatever came by. We generally lived in a bubble and didn't really have until, like I said, maybe the early 2000s, finally had access to just other stuff that we could get, maybe know a buddy that had a cut. I ran a couple of, I got spider mites twice for the same purple Kush cut. I got to be honest with you, man. I'd fight mites again to get her back. Like, it's one of the few that like got away that I don't know if I've seen in the exact same condition since the last time I saw her. And
I'll see
yeah,
if I
man,
can get you one.
that kid gave me mites twice, and I knew the second time I was going to get them, and I was like, I gotta have it. I gotta have it.
I everybody knows I grew up a farm kid, but not a lot of people know I also grew up, involved in a motorcycle community. I'll say, won't shout out names.
Nice.
But I still know a group of bikers to this day that have the purple Kush. And like because it had unmistakable leaves, right? Like that was a defining trait of it. And one day one of them he just grew plants, he got clones every year from
Right.
his buddies and he just grew them out. That's all he did. And he goes, "Can you come over here and kind of like show me how you're?" He was an old school grower that had never really done anything. Like I said, just water his plants. But he saw some of the things that I was doing. He's like, "Can you come over and kind of show me how to like strip them and like defoliate them a little bit where I'm gonna get my bud production where I want it to be?" I'm like, yeah, absolutely, man. And he started shouting out some different stuff, and this a few years ago. So there was like some Jack crosses. Um, I don't remember all what he had, but it wasn't all like super old stuff. And then right at the end of his garden, he goes, "Oh, and I got a purple Kush over here." And I was even being a smart ass then. And I was like, yeah, we'll see. Like we'll see. And I walk over the clone and I see it and I see that long middle leaf, that slender pointed shape. And I was like, that's fucking purple Kush. And he's like, well, I hope so. My guys have been fucking growing this for like how
Wow.
many decades now? I'm like, holy shit, dude. I haven't
Yeah, the
seen that
first time I
forever.
got
I
that.
grew it one time
Oh wow.
out in a greenhouse and
I
it was
fell in
just
love.
strictly production. And
Yeah.
I fell in love with it, but I fell in love with it afterwards. I
It's
like
not
the plant as
it's
is.
it's not a commercial producer. Like it's not one that you're just gonna, grow shitloads of weed of. But it's very typical, and it's one of those that when you see it, you know it. I miss her so much. It's the
It's
only one
good.
that
It's
got
a
away.
staple.
It's the only
It
one. Like people ask me
and
all the time about like what strain of all the strains that you had, like what strain would you, is there one you always wanted, or it's probably that one. She never came back.
I'll see if I can get a hold of that one.
Yeah,
And I'll keep you in the loop with it.
yeah, that'd be
Deep
awesome.
Magician wants to know, why don't you have pictures of your stuff on your website?
So we have been through uh, 3 PayPal accounts, 2 Venmo accounts, a Cash App account, and 3 credit card processors. Okay. Anybody that's tried to get a credit card processor in the last couple of years will tell you that the few that are legitimate credit card processors that will even have a conversation with you if you're a seed vendor are very particular about what you can put. So what we originally were going to do was put pictures of all the strains, put descriptions, put, if we could get THC contents and stuff like that. And so when we signed up for this most recent credit card processor, we had to go through the underwriting process, which is normal of any proper banking situation. And they were pretty much like, look, the less info you put on there, the better. And nothing about like THC percentages, content, terpene profiles. So, what we're working on doing, and once again, anybody that's followed me for a while now knows I'm on my 4th Instagram page. I've lost about 60,000 followers. I've probably lost 15,000 pictures of my strains. I put 8 years into my first page, and it got shut down with 30,000 followers. Broke my heart. But what we decided to do was to start redistributing all of our advertising of all kinds. So now what I'm doing is all the weed pictures are on my subreddit, which is r/terpene genetics. What I do still have is there. And as I get more pictures, we're leaving them there now instead of Instagram, so that when they get taken down, I don't lose years of my work. That's my fault. It's my fault. Like when you do everything and when you do it all yourself, you kind of get into this, like, it's easier to just have one social media page. So I can just do everything, in one place, and I don't necessarily have to have 6 different pages. It's like you said with Discord. There's a really healthy community on my Discord now. Those guys share tons of pictures of my work. And for me, I kind of am completely hands off with it in a sense that, like, I'm not over moderating it. I'm not like telling people, if you have a problem with my gear, please go tell somebody. Like, tell me. I've always said, if you have a problem with my gear, I'll replace it happily. You tell me what your issue is. We'll talk through it. I'll figure it out. Seeds are living things, and it happens. But the reason I don't have any pictures on my Instagram page now is because I'm tired of getting them shut down. I'm really kind of sick of it. And so I'm not putting any more weed pictures on Instagram for the time being until we can figure out how they can stay there. Yeah.
How about on your Discord?
Oh, Discord. Yeah, Discord. Anything goes there. I mean, that's one of those things that, like, I need to start getting more active and, like, posting there, but I also don't want it to be one of those things. I'm really weird about the self-promotion shit, man. And maybe I'm just old school. I kind of joke that as soon as they're dead air, I start plugging. But, like, that's something I had to teach myself to do. It's not something that, like, comes super naturally to me of, like, I want everybody to see everything I'm doing 24/7. So it's like, once I get into a habit of this is where I'm sharing weed pictures, man, I forget there's 6 other places I need to go post that same picture,
Right.
Like, that's kind of tough, man. Like, I do have other things going on. Like, I do weed
Got a life
most of my day, but, like, I do try to have some semblance of a life as well. And so it's like, one day I'll pay somebody to handle all of that. Social media, YouTube, run my podcast. Like, we're just not there yet. A lot of us are bootstrapping our businesses, and a lot of us started with absolutely nothing and have built names and brands that people recognize to some degree. And that just comes from being persistent. I've put hundreds.
How long have you been public with terpene genetics?
17. I'm sorry, 16, 2016. Terpene genetics. Yeah, 2016 was when it became, like, full time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was after a few years of in the commercial industry doing a little bit of everything. I won the first ever rosin competition with a hash company. I worked in a bunch of large commercial grows, did it on my own for 18 years on the other side of the law. And that was really 2015 was probably the beginning of me starting a social media page, the original Terpene page that's now long defunct and reset. And I did that until 2020 when they shut the first one down. So it was like 6 years or something like that I had built that first page. And then after that, like, I started doing the Growcast. Jordan is an absolutely awesome dude. He was one of those people that, like, when they shut down my Instagram, leveled with me and was like, you shouldn't have relied on them so heavily. Don't do it again. Like, it wasn't like that, but that was exactly the point. Was he was essentially saying, like, get a website, diversify, make sure you've got, all this. The other thing, back to the original question, now I remember what started all this. We are also trying to get my strains put up onto Seed Finder. We just did a huge batch of them. I have a few strains at this point. So getting them all logged in and all of that into Seed Finder has been a chore. The goal is eventually to have that be more of a repository for the actual data of, like, photos and terpene cannabinoid percentages and whatever other extemporaneous data we can put together. But once again, man, it's being a one-man show. It's like my wife helps me a lot, and it's the two of us. But that's, I don't have a team. I don't have a bunch of people that do things. We knock out everything that has to get done. And it's one of those things that it's a passion for me. I love what I do. If I didn't, I probably would have given up ages ago, because there's so much that's not dealing with plants in this business that is the tough part. Like, if my worst problem in a day is plant related, it was a good day. But most days it's dealing with somebody who's pissed off or somebody who's angry about something, or and it's one of those things that's the part of the business that I understand why so many breeders dump their gear onto seed banks and just say, I'm not going to handle it. I'm not going to deal with it. I don't care. So the breeders that go above and beyond to have that connection with the people that are growing their strains, not only is it rare, but those are the ones that you should support, because those are the people that love what they do. They're not just a face, a brand with no face. It's not just a marketing team that's running it all. It's somebody who loves what they do and who's passionate about what they're producing. And 9 times out of 10, these social media companies don't want us advertising without paying them large amounts of advertising money. So that's really the big difference between, your big brands and you or I, is that they probably have a $10,000 a month marketing budget that they're putting straight into Instagram's pockets. Whereas if you're not paying them ad revenue, they look at it as a burden that you're making money without giving them their fair cut, I guess. My
I
goals are,
remember you saying you had was it sorbet?
I just dropped a sorbet line. We just did another sorbet line. It'll be the last one I'm working with this line. Eventually, I'm going to go back and work with some more of the original F1s and just see what else is in that line. The sorbet line that I've had now has been worked with by a handful of other breeders. It wasn't mine. Excuse me. It was an aficionado strain I found and worked with. I don't see him working with it heavy, and we've worked with it a lot. Leo's told a few people that the cut that we worked with was better than anything he had ever seen from those. I know Mantis worked with it at some point. Leapfrog Genetics has worked with it a bunch. And so I did what I needed with it. I want to go back and see what else is there. But my next line, I've noticed that, once again, in these conversations that we're having somewhat repeatedly, I don't have enough Poopenes. So we're going to go back and we're going to dig in some rancid, rotten, just poop. And we're going to see what we can find. I hear the people when they speak. I will say that. I've never been one of those people that, isn't a part of the community. I talk to growers all day long. Anybody that has a question, a grow question, a breeding question, whether it's about my genetics or otherwise, I try to answer them all, because I remember being a young cat who didn't have access to, the resources that we have today, or being overwhelmed with the information that was out there and not having anybody that I trusted that I could go, hey man, how does this work? Like, what's your opinion? And so I answer all of those. I answer every question I can. And I hear people. I hear, we don't have these conversations in a vacuum. Like, I hear you talking. You people want nasty, funky, poopy, gassy. I hear it. And I have a problem with, like, I have a tendency to run fruity profiles, just because I find that, like, as far as the diversity in that, I've found there's just so much there of, like, the different ways it kind of mimics other fruity profiles that we associate with, but yet in its complexity of how it can taste, it can, a single strain can smell like 5 or 6 different things, and you just go, yeah, that's. And I find in the fruity kind of category, there's a lot just to dig there. But, I definitely listen to people. And when they say, like, we want the funk, I'm like, we got to have that funk then. Let's find it, like, let's see what we can do.
I wish I had that on my soundboard right now.
Let's dig in there and see what we can find. And I'll meet you in the support group, I guess,
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So next it's Poopenes. 5-year, man, that really, to me,
I want to hear more about the sorbet line.
Okay, yeah. The sorbet line, what's funny about the sorbet, right? From the minute I started working with it, everybody that messed with any of the F1s, that messed with any of the F2s, any of the crosses that we did of it, has told me it's one of the most complex strains they've ever worked with. And when I first ran the original, so it's got. I named one of the crosses that I did with the sorbet. I named Nag Champa, right? Everybody asked me, does it smell like the incense? No. But it reminds me, there is a lot of incense there, like incense kind of terps. But the thing that I love about it is it's so complex that it reminds you of incense in that there's so much going on, but you almost can't point to say, like, it reminds me of that. Right. So it's one of those strains that the more you smoke it, you just want to hit it again, just so you can pull that flavor and try and put it together of what that note is that you're tasting. So the pineapple sorbet that I originally worked with, it has a lot of candy pineapple, but it has this like incense on the beach type of thing where you almost get like a coconutty, lots of fruit, like just assorted fruit type of thing. But it's also got this, I always say it reminds me of like rum punches on the beach, all of the tropical that just goes with that. It's just a level of unique that I had to work with it. And so the thing that I found is that anything you hit with it kind of takes this even amount of this overly complex, fruity, incensey thing, and then kind of marries that with the weird. So that's kind of like with the pineapple meatball that somebody was asking about earlier. I never thought meat breath and pineapple sorbet would work. Like when I put it together, it was one of those strains that I was just like, this is weird, but I'm going to throw it and see how it happens, And it's been one of the top
Okay.
4 strains of mine that people have resonated with the most. Like it washes well. It's a hasher. The profile is super strange and unique. It's a box checker.
That sounds delicious. So speaking of growing your genetics, I said I hadn't grown your genetics yet, but I had wanted to for a couple of years now. I've been watching it. I just, I've had so much shit going on. I really haven't had the opportunity. But you mentioned Leapfrog Genetics earlier. They're both good friends of mine. And they sent me a bunch of seeds that they did from your work of that Champa Rose. That's one of the ones that I really wanted to grow out, see what they were doing. It looked really, really good.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I didn't have seeds of was the orange head rush. Do you still do those?
Yeah, so I'm going to get back to those ended up being some of the heaviest yielding strains that I've made. Those the 501st OG Deep Chunk, the ones I called the head rush, those are actually from Eclectic Elegance Seeds, and I think he ended up. What's funny was he gave me those way back when I asked him if I could work with him. I made some seeds of my own, and just one of those where I put some stuff together and I needed a name. So then later down the road, he does his own thing with them, and probably still sells them. Amazing seeds, but those ended up being some of the chunkiest crosses that I worked with, like out of everything that I've worked with so far. And so, yeah, I'm going to get back to that. I always joke that like my goal has always been to get people to smoke more Kush. So like if you kind of look at through 85% of the work that I've done, there's kind of a prevailing theme. And it's just if I could get people to smoke more Myrcene Kush, Myrcene heavy Kush, I think we'd all get a little higher. Um, that now the counter to that is that most of the Poopenes, I feel like most of the heavy Poopenes, most of the funkiest profiles tend to be Southeast Asian in origin, tend to be kind of more sativa leaning strains. Not to say there's not that in the in the indica profiles as well, but I feel like a lot of what we associate with these days is like the GMOs and the Chem 4s and the really stinky stuff. A lot of those are Southeast Asian strains. They're mostly sativa strains. That's why they take 11 and a half weeks and they're still not done. It's why at 11 weeks, they're really starting to put on their true show, like they're just not strains that not great strains to grow indoors. Most of them will have some hermaphroditic tendencies if you stress them a little much, but that's where we get all those like awesome, stinky, yucky profiles from, is those old school Thais, those old school Vietnamese strains, the Cambodian, there's the Southeast Asia
It's
has
the effect
provided.
for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Those strains are devastating too. Like they are really heavy, but for somebody who doesn't have a super tolerance, like there's a little bit of like they can be overwhelming.
Oh yeah, it'll fucking put you on your ass. Um, but that's what really got me, and then that's why I shouted out the breeders that I did. I'm interested in working with some of your gear. I do work with Dynasty. I even work with Solo, and Solo does a lot of, like modern short week heavy terp stuff. But I think it's important to take this modern cannabis that we have now, and for the people that are willing to do the work, to go back to those, old ties and stuff like that and find that one that's stable, find that one that is unique, which might be 1 in 1,000, but still taking the time to do that and work it back into modern medicine so we can kind of open up that genetic profile again.
Yeah, one of the problems that we're having right now with the numbers game there, I don't know how many people I could tell you said, man, I found these. My dad gave me these seeds. My dad gave me these seeds. I'm going to start a skunk project. I'm about to pop all. He gave me bags of them. I'm going to start a skunk project. We're going to resurrect skunk. Right? And then everybody runs into the same problem. Seeds that are older than 95 are probably going to have less than a 1% germ rate, if that. Right? If you're talking about strains that are seeds that are 20 plus years old, the other thing is the 70s specifically, 70s, 80s, where a lot of those strains, those old school strains that people remember, right? The skunk and the original lineages of those, that was a long time ago. It was a long time ago. So unless somebody's sitting on cuts of that, any seeds that might be from that era are long since worthless. So we really get into, like, if you're talking about bringing stuff back from old stuff, you better have hundreds of thousands of seeds to be able to start with so you can just get a couple of plants that work. But if we're talking about something where people are going and finding landrace genetics and finding these, small untouched areas where there's or lineage, legacy genetics where people have actually been breeding these particular strains and they're not overly hybridized with American stuff or Dutch stuff, that's what we need. Like, we need to grab as much of that as we have access to as the community, and just so that that's the sort of stuff we can still be infusing in once inevitably modern genetics get all over the planet. There's still only a few places in the world where you can find seeds that aren't just, uh, old Dutch strains, or that aren't just, modern American strains. And that's the beautiful part about those people that are still going out there, still hunting stuff down in these little pockets of the world, because that's where the I don't know is going to come from. It's not going to be from overly banging together stuff we already know what it does. It's going to be going back, now that we have the analytics, now that we have the capabilities to do testing, to go back and find in these, somewhat older genetics, old world style genetics, not old seeds, that we're finally going to see, what else is out there that we don't know about yet.
So you gave us a bunch of seeds to give away to our Patreon members. We're going to be doing an episode of Do or Dab tomorrow. I don't know if you have any time, but if you want to come in and see your seeds be given away during a game show, it's a lot of fun. We have 2 new members coming on, Right On and Taco with Axe, to go head to head on Do or Dab, which is like a game where we have 2 players that go through a game board, random selection style. They get a number, it comes up, it might say do a 1 gram dab. It might say something like sing Bohemian Rhapsody for 30 seconds. You just never know.
Right.
So they get questions like this and they go head to head. At the end of the game, everybody's super high. Everybody had a great time, and the winner gets to pick a pack of seeds from you while the other one gets a random pack.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. What time?
That's going to be about the same time, about 5 p.m.
Okay, because I got a 9 tomorrow. We're
PST.
doing I got a podcast tomorrow evening at 9. We do 2. And as much as I hate Instagram at this point, it's where my following is at the moment.
Yeah.
But I'm doing 2 podcasts a week. We do Dank Talk on Wednesdays with me and the Real Mac Blunts. And then on Saturdays, I do the OG Sesh, which is usually just me and another. It's this. It's usually me and another grower, another breeder, and we just in an hour we sit and we shoot the shit off the cuff, and it's all off the top of the head, and it's really just the conversations that so many of us have when it's just us growers or just us breeders or the industry people, and your average listener probably doesn't hear so much of this kind of stuff, where these are the kind of just conversations that we have so often when we're just sitting around and just puffing, whether it's about grow styles or whether it's about it's the life. It's just there's so much that I love about what I do, so I don't ever think that it's 90% of my day is just talking weed with people. And then I just figured I might as well stick a camera in my face and
Yeah.
let somebody else listen to it, because it works.
What I love about it is I always enjoyed getting with the homies, sitting on the couch, smoking weed, letting the conversation go wherever it goes. And now with, all of this technology that we're using right now to connect with people all over the world that do all these different niches within the cannabis community, I get no more pleasure than getting to meet new faces, and find out those people that I vibe with. It's fucking cool, man. Like a gigantic, constant going cannabis event.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like
Well,
speed dating.
it's even better because so many of the cannabis events have either gotten shut down or wrapped up. They're not what they
Yeah,
were
we
for
don't
a long
even
time.
have Seattle Hemp Fest. They were talking about doing it this year, and if you go on that was the biggest event. That
Mhm.
was one of the biggest events in the United States, Seattle Hemp Fest,
It was one of
grabbing
the
more people.
older ones too. I want to say that, and like
Yeah,
the Hash Bash in Ann Arbor, I think were two of the ones I remember way back in the day
yeah,
reading about in High Times.
yeah, but if you go on the website, even this year, it's like not confirmed. They were talking about
That
doing the
sucks.
event, and who
Yeah,
knows, And
yeah.
it's
I mean,
sad that,
it's there was a long history there of cups and them being really awesome, and then there was a point, a lot of it had to do with the legalization end of it, that when it was kind of in a gray area in some of these places, then it was one thing. But now that it's legal and everything needs to be within a very specific framework of you have to buy the weed in dispensaries and you can't just open smoke and all of a lot of things changed. They quit doing the Denver Cups on 420. Like those were some of the biggest events on the planet. I mean, you would have 30,000 people a day by 3 days. And it was just, it was open season. It was literally like we did a few Cali Cups where especially the first couple chalices, where you could just walk up and purchase slabs on people's tables. You could just walk up and buy pounds, and it was that all ended 15, 16, and it's just not the
yeah,
same without the vendors and without being able to show off and bring whatever you want, and it's yeah.
I really don't have the time like I used to do shows anymore because
Right.
I've got so much of my own stuff going on. Do you still participate in shows
No.
quite often? No?
Nah, man, I did a couple runs. Man, it just came down to A, it's an expensive lifestyle. B, doesn't always pay off. C, once again, I grew up on music lots, and it's just a holdover. It's the exact same thing in a different parking lot. It's just people hustling in a parking lot. And like I said, now it's not quite as open season. So whatever you're selling, it's just not as easy to make as much money on them. I never really had a passion for the weed circuit. There's some people that were just made for it, and I always looked at it just like a concert. If they weren't doing shows, they would just be doing you know weed events, and they would go to city to city to city to city, and you'd see the same people on the lot every single time. Same people paid for the big booth. Same people are in the back. Like it was, and it's all politics. It's all, I don't know. Once again, I got other things to do than travel around the country smoking weed. I love it. If I can drop into a cup every now and again, it's still a fun time. But it hasn't. There's just this era of like it's not the same.
It's not.
A lot of it has changed. There really is no big cups anymore like there used to be, And so now so much of it is like everybody's desperately trying to vie for the same amount of dollars. Whereas when you make your money online, it's just how many people can you get in front of. Whereas if you're making your money in a parking lot, it's how many people showed up today. You don't
Yeah.
control that. So there's a little bit of when you have to pay money to go do those shows, you have to pay money for advertising, you have to pay money for banners, you have to pay money for entries if you're entering the cup. You have to, and it's just, it stopped being fun or profitable. And I think for a lot of people, once they had access to the internet in a little bit better way, so many people were hitting, Instagram for a long time and just crushing it that, yeah, it didn't make sense to go fly, especially post pandemic. How much flying are you trying to do? Like, you just want to spend your whole time in an airplane and in a hotel for not a whole lot of money. Yeah, you could get a McDonald's job and make more money than you're going to make touring around the country. And it's a little bit of like, I've always appreciated being the kind of breeder that like people find me, and when they find me, they love what they end up finding. So it's not one of those things where you saw me in a magazine or you saw me at a hype event and then you got stuff home and then it's super expensive and then you run it and you kind of go, I don't get it. Like the people have always found me, and despite the fact that Instagram keeps shutting us down, it doesn't really affect much because now we've spread out so much, and the people that find us are almost always word of mouth. It's almost always a friend of a friend told me you had something that was different than everybody else. And like I said, that's why I try to keep something for everybody. I try to keep a flavor for every palate. But at the same time, I'm my pickiest critic, whether it's my grow, whether it's, my seeds. So if I see something and it impresses me, I usually assume that's the top. And generally speaking, when I show that to other people, regardless if it's my own work or something I'm running from somebody else, if I usually say, this is shocking, try this, then it's usually something that other people are going to pick up on and go, yeah, that's something special. So a good one, a good for instance was the blackout truffle, right? So the blackout truffle was a cut that I got from a dispensary I was working at. And when I left, the veg manager hit me up and was just like, hey, if there's anything you want, let me know. So he had this biochem cut from 303 seeds. It was a Chem 4 Sensi Star. And it is probably one of the strongest single cuts that I've worked with. Like it's tests high and it's got a ton of terps, which is super rare. And we crossed that to the white cherry truffle, and which is another chem heavy, chem cross. And it's just that's the one that I've had people come to me and go, my customers are scared of it. And I'm like, you need better customers. But beside the point, like it's just, I think people think it's a marketing thing, but I've had multiple people come to me and be like, it's too strong for me. I can't I can't run it. I can't, everybody that I give it to, it's too much. And it's one of those that for me, I've seen tests on it. Most tests of the cross aren't in the 30 range. The mom was a dispensary cut, so it regularly tested in the 30s at dispose, like no problem. But the crosses have all been kind of high to mid 20s, but just lots of myrcene. And once again, that's that kind of combination that just makes everybody knock out. And it's almost like a cheat code. Heavy myrcene levels is almost like the cheat code to high potency, because most people can't tell the difference between high THC and something just makes them so body high they're ready to pass out. Like that's what high is to so many people, right? Unless you just smoke sativas and just literally wig out. That's generally when people go, it was too strong for me. It's almost always because it made them go to sleep. It knocked you just off your ass. And that tends to be those heavy myrcene strains, whether they're super high THC or not.
Out of everything that you've made, what would you say would be the number one strain at this moment where if you were gone tomorrow, you would want that to represent the work that you've done with cannabis?
Blackout truffle.
Blackout truffle for sure.
Hands down. Yeah, and I think there's strains that I've made that have been more popular, like that other people would probably argue with me about. Like the Nag Champa is one that, so many people have come and told me I tell people it's special, and I think people think it's marketing hype. That would probably be the very close number two. The Nag Champa is a special plant, but the Blackout truffle for me is a level of medicinal that, like, it's that cut through plant. It's that one that, like, when I got jars of everything around, when I hit the Blackout truffle, and even if it's from a friend who doesn't know what they're doing and they beat their plants up and they were struggle looking and they didn't get a good feed on it, it's still the gorgeous one. It's still the one that just wows everybody. For me, it's the profile. It's got everything that the chem line has, right? It's got a heavy mothball, spoiled Thai food thing going on, but it doesn't take 11 weeks to finish. It's almost always finished in like 8 to 10 weeks, no problem. And it's heavy. Like I said, it's the one that I've had other people tell me their customers don't want because it's too strong. I've had other growers tell me they had to cut back on running it because it was just too much for them. But like for me with tolerance issues, it's the one that, like, if you ask me the desert island question, because that's the other one that I get like on a lot on the, when I'm talking to maybe non-breeder people, it's always the, like, what's your strain, 3 strains that you'd live on a desert island with? And that would have to be number one for me, because every time I have something else and I go back to that one, it's the one that always works. Like I build tolerance really quickly to strains. Most of them, depending on terp profiles and certain other things, most of them I'll build a tolerance to within a couple of days of just puffing it regularly. But that's the one that, like, it just always kind of kicks you where you need it. And it's like, it's almost the one where you have to go, it has a special place. Like, I can't, a little too much in the middle of the day will still get you, like, I might have to go have a lay down. Yeah, that's the one that I think, if you asked me, the strain that I think represents, my favorite of the work that I've done, it would be the Blackout truffle. But the Nag Champa is a close second.
What if I asked you the same question, but about somebody's genetics other than your own?
Ooh, that's a good one. Ask me the question again. What was the whole of the question, just so I'm specific?
If you were on a desert island, you could only take one strain with you, and it's not your own work. Got to be somebody else's work.
Man, I got to go back to that purple Kush cut, man. I got to go back to that purple Kush just because it's the one that got away. It's the one that I haven't had in so long. And it's the one of the, once you have a strain, like, it's in your grow and you can run it as much as you want and you can fill jars up with it, then it's easy to get over it real quick. Like even the most amazing looking strains, once I can grow it for myself and I can just fill a whole room of it if I want, then it's kind of like, I don't know, you kind of get a little jaded on it, right? So it's like the stuff that I've had access to throughout my history of growing is always the stuff that I'd be like, if it just never came around again, it'd be okay. Even the best stuff that I've ever grown or run, at the end of the day, you just kind of go, man, if I had jars of it at one point, then, there's other stuff out there. But that the ones that got away, the ones that you didn't really get as much as you wanted, the ones that you didn't really get your fill of, you didn't get sick of, those are the ones for me that I think I'm going to be stuck on a desert island, man. I really want something that got away, something that reminds me of the day,
Do you keep cuts very much? Or do you strictly work from seed?
Yeah, but mostly, once again, it's mostly like the legacy stuff that I really love, like the Nag Champa stuff.
Which one's stuck around the longest?
Nag Champa.
Of somebody else's work?
Oh, of somebody else? Oh.
Yeah.
That's tough. Because I don't keep, man. I don't keep. I just don't. Like I just don't. I don't covet cuts. I wish I had
Right.
earlier because when I was working in commercial dispensaries really heavily, like I had access to so much stuff. And there was so much stuff. The sour diesel deep chunk that we used to run, orange ghost from obsolete from back in the day. There was an orange legends OG cut that he put out that they used to have. They had a tiger's milk cut that was just stupid. And you know,
I
it's.
remember.
I wish I'd have thought earlier on, like this is going to be full time for me. I'm going to do nothing but seeds and genetics because there were so many genetics that went through my hands that at the time I was just running flower. You know, I was just running grows of flowers, so it made sense to just, you know, run a tray of it, run a couple trays of it till you're sick, and run something else. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. Other people's stuff. That double purple doja mental floss got away from me back in the day. And here's what's funny: I'm not a big sativa guy. It was more leaning on the sativa side. But as a hash maker, it was the first strain I ever saw that had purple trichomes, which made purple sift. And so the first time I sifted it, and I was looking like I had done something wrong. It's like it doesn't even look purple. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
the first time you sift purple trikes, it looks gray. And when you're used to seeing like white and like crystally white, it's a weird thing the first time you see it. So eventually I get the scope out, you know, and I'm like scoping and I see, you know, you can see the pigment go up through the trichome stalk and then fill the trichome head while they're maturing. And then it all made, you know, it was one of those early like you're just in your grow and you don't really realize. Once again, this is before the internet, so super macro pictures back then were not common.
Yeah.
You know, people they weren't everywhere. You didn't see these like amazing
We aren't
4K
schwaling it up.
pictures of like two trichome individual trichomes. You know, and so the first time I saw that it was a double purple doja mental floss cross from Outlaw Grower, and it kind of you know you have these points along your growing career where you see something new and you know we all may find it on our own, but to you it's a new kind of thing and it pushes you that little bit more you know into the minutia of growing, and it's one of those things that really once you've realized something on that level that you didn't know, now you just have that thought of like, what else don't I know? What else can I learn? Like, what else small things am I missing? Because you know, the first time you see purple keef and you're just making keef on your own and it doesn't look like the rest of it, you're just like, whoa, whoa. I mean, now we've all seen a purple rosin drip or we've all seen, you know,
Yeah.
they're out there. It's not
I don't
purple.
know if everybody has, man. There's some
Yeah.
people that just I've met through doing this. We've got Patreon members from all over the world. The love of cannabis is intense, but there's a lot of people that really don't do social media that
Yeah.
just like, oh, well, I saw your podcast and I came on here and yeah, we grow weed. Like
That's awesome.
it's
Yeah.
fucking awesome. Oh
That's
yeah.
awesome. I love those people because they're not jaded by all of the things that maybe you or I are jaded by because we see them 18 million times on the internet. Like I made a meme that the worst headache you can have is
Innocent.
watching what's wrong with my plant posts on Reddit. Oh, oh, the level of pain. Like you do it for 5 minutes and just go scrolling through and look at what's wrong with my plant. Here's a single leaf. What's wrong with my plant? Oh, oh, it's so bad. And it's like people that don't know all of those cliches and the things that we've all seen a million times. Those are the best because let's be honest, they come from a place of like weed
Like the cow
is just
mag.
a love and it's a plant
More
and that's
cow mag.
it. Yeah, yeah. The more cow mag joke is we beat that one to death too, though. But that is the funny thing about the more cow mag joke is how apt it actually is because it's twofold, right? The joke is just add more cow mag, it makes everything better. There are literally people that are using cow mag as some sort of a crutch, or it's got to be in everything, or you know, and Here's the funny thing: calcium and magnesium are both micronutrients. So your plant doesn't need a ton of either one of them. I mean, it needs them, but not in these massive amounts. And the joke
Right.
is that like more micronutrients isn't going to help your plant one iota, but it's the duct tape of the weed world. Something's wrong with your weed, more cow mag in 2 more weeks, and you're good.
We do have synthetic growers. We've got synganic growers. But what I do myself is no-till living soil.
Nice.
So the amount of times that I recommend CalMag, like
Most
never.
organic gardeners wouldn't know what CalMag was.
You shouldn't
Unless you
really
see it on
need
the
it.
shelf.
I mean, if you really need to get some oyster shell or something like that in there, bone meal, work it in, top dress it, that's just kind of like being aware of, your soil and
Yeah, a
building it
lot of
up
it
and
comes from the
re-amending it. But the amount of times I've needed to add
no,
CalMag,
no.
it's
You probably don't own a PPH.
nilch.
You probably don't own an ECPPM meter either.
No,
Yeah, no, you wouldn't need one.
no.
It came from the commercialization of the industry. It came from the fact that now every town has a large scale grow store, and those guys make money selling you stuff. And so when you go in there and you don't know what you need, they're going to sell you anything they can, and that makes them more money. I mean, that's why most of those nutrient lines are broken down into 12 different bottles. They could sell you all of that into 2 bottles. They just can't charge you as much for it. You don't really need 90% of that stuff. And then you go in there and you're like, I don't know what I need. Can you hook me up? Like, I need, they're like, you need CalMag.
I'm going to talk shit just because I was this grower at one point. So I feel like I get to talk shit about my old self here.
Yeah.
But most of those bottled nutrient companies, I feel like those bottles are 90% water. And that's not just because that's the popular way of thinking, but I like doing, I practice KNF and making my own nutrients for my soil. And I can make nutrients for my soil at a fraction of the cost. And by fraction of the cost, I'm talking about what I would have been paying with a 7-part bottle system. For one bottle, I'm doing like 1/200th of that.
It's a $1 trillion industry.
And per dilution rate, I'm using way less than what's recommended on any bottle.
Yeah, that's the trick that I tell so many new growers is like whatever you pick, whatever you start with, you probably need half of whatever's been recommended to you. Like for a lot of people, the way that you grow is very much a passion. It's the sort of thing that you find at a certain point, and it's a very beautiful niche of the market. So many people that get started, the thought of having, vats of stuff rotting around their house to make nutrients, to dilute it is such a foreign concept that, so many people go into the grocery store and just like, I need a bag of something, I need a bottle of something, and I need a light. You're lucky if that's, and that's pretty much the grocery store is like, oh, we got you. We got 6 or 7 bottles for you. We got fans. You're not going to believe it. And it's $1 trillion
Everything
industry.
you need.
Yeah, it's $1 trillion industry, if not more. And there's so much just snakery in that. And it's like, it's overwhelming now because when you go into a lot of these huge grow shops, there's so much stuff that even as a seasoned grower, it's shocking at first because you're just like, good Lord, I've seen all of this and I've never seen half of this. Like you guys got stuff. I always joked about in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was always this, it was like a lamp mover, but it was essentially like a bladed fan with like 15 blades, and they just had like screwed in HID bulbs, and it would spin just like a fan would. And I never saw anybody buy them. But for more than a decade, every time I went into the grow shop, they had them on display. And I would always think to myself, like, it's the same amount of light. It's just going in a circle. Like it's not like a proper light mover where it's moving, 4 feet away and you're covering more canopy. It was the most useless tool I could ever think of. They were probably hundreds, if not more, dollars each. And I guarantee you there's somebody out there running one of them things still today and swears it's gotten them increased yields. But it's like there's so much junk, there's so much just foolery
But
and
wait, there's
quackery.
more.
Yeah, it's almost like the as seen
The
on
all
TV
new.
level.
Yeah.
It's so cheesy, and it's like they
Only
make
two
money
payments of
selling you stuff.
$29.95.
Yeah, they make money selling you stuff. So like, don't listen to anything those guys say. Like, figure out what you need ahead of time. Figure out what your niche is in the market. If you just want to grow organics, learn about organics. If you want to grow synthetics, learn about hydro, learn about synthetics. But it's like the last person you need to go take your grow tip advice from is the guy that makes money from your failure. That's $1 million worth of game, because those guys, and not to say I haven't met some awesome dudes that work at the grow shop, but their whole business is on you needing to spend more money, whether that's on more bottles of newts, more pots, more lights, more fans. They make money when you have to spend. So, like, going to them and asking them immediately, what do I need? You need all of it. We got the best lights you can think of. We're going to get you on the 12 bottle system. It's super easy. Don't even worry. You're going to use them all at the same time. It doesn't really matter. It's all the same shit. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. Like, as we see more new growers in more legal states, right? There's a million new. The joke is the reason Blue Dream will always be somebody's favorite strain is because a new state is about to go legal soon, and there's another couple million people that have seen Blue Dream in high times, and they heard everybody talk about Blue Dream, and now they can finally get their hands on this mythical, magical strain. And so now there's a million new people looking for a Blue Dream cut. And it's the same thing with all these,
How do you feel
blessed,
about Blue Dream?
blessed new growers. But, just know what you need, because there's somebody out there willing to take you for a lot more than you should be spending to get started in a grow. How do I feel
So
about Blue Dream?
how do you feel about Blue Dream now that you said that?
So, what's funny about Blue Dream, it's the only strain that I've ever seen a documented 3 a light in 1,000 watt bulb grows. It's the only strain I've ever actually seen pull 3 a light. So I can't argue with
Wow.
why it's popular, right? It's a beautiful strain when it grows, huge buds, lots of resin, got kind of a generic blueberry muffin profile. It's not going to get anybody out there too high. Never have to worry about that.
How do you feel about it?
It will never be in my grow.
Okay.
It hasn't. I've never. I've
This is
worked
a
with.
long running joke that you don't know the backstory on.
Oh,
And now
okay.
I need to ask you,
Believe
how do
me,
you
you're not.
feel?
You're not the first to have a Blue Dream joke. I actually
I
another
still
funny.
have it. I still have the gut.
No, this joke has one more layer of comedy to it. So I
Yes.
actually did start a Facebook group. You can still go find it today. It's called the Closet Blue Dream Lovers. And the joke was you can now put your friends who talk Blue Dream up amongst themselves and have the whole argument about why it's so amazing. And and you can just add them to the Facebook group, the Closet Blue
I'm
Dream
going to join
Lovers.
that group.
It's still out there floating around. It's never been very active, but it's, once again, man, I'm starting up groups to bring people together that have common interests, pooping fetishes, Blue Dream fetishes, whatever it is, man. I'm here to support the bringing together of just like-minded souls and individuals.
Yeah. Sounds like my group.
So now I got to know
How do I feel bad for being in it?
what's the Blue Dream joke?
Oh, it's not a Blue Dream joke. So yeah, I still keep the Santa Cruz cut just because I agree with everything you said. It's got a very generic taste. It is an impressive yielder. I like the bag appeal on it too. I think it's just a good looking bud.
Mhm.
But the plant structure too, it's a strong plant and it's really good at holding weight. So I'd always, when I started started getting interested in making seeds for myself, it wasn't that I loved Blue Dream or anything. It was like, it's a strong plant. It's a solid yielder. Is this something that I could increase the potency on and give a better flavor while still retaining that yield or not taking it down too much, still retaining those base traits. But I have not bred with it yet. And it's just kind of been something that was nostalgic for me that I kind of kept around to see if I could do that one day. But it's nostalgic for me because have you ever heard of rad boarding?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so it's this like country boy redneck game. It's a lot of fun. But we all go down.
I'm from the deep south, so try me.
Okay. So this is so dangerous. But if you do it and you're good at it and you figure it out, it's a lot of fun. But essentially what we do is we take this rad board and it's like this not crescent moon, not D shape, but somewhere in between, just slightly crescent.
Behind a truck or a bulldozer?
Neither.
Oh, okay.
So we tie a rope to a tree, and then to that rope you tie a bungee cord, and then you attach the bungee cord to the board, and you lean on the board and ride it out into the current of the river.
Okay.
And if you lean the board back, the current pushes you back and it stretches out the bungee cord. And then when you get up on it and you start to lean forward, you can surf in the river like that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But if you mess up and you land in front of that board, it's on that bungee and it loses tension. Yeah, it's scary, but it's an awesome sport. It's a lot of fun. I've done it quite a few times, but I've seen people get messed up from it too. But there was this dude that used to run it down here in our area, and he grew all kinds of Blue Dream. That was like the only thing he ever wanted to grow, just because it was such a production plant, and he could get tons of yield back then, and you could get decent money for weed,
So we have this. It's the conversation it's cliche at this point, right? Because I joked we were going to do an hour just about Blue Dream, and we were just going to steel man on one side and devil's advocate the other side, and we're just going to have the conversation that you and I have probably had 100 times by now about the one side says it's a production strain, it's immune to PM, it's it's got all these beautiful traits and that's why we run it, and then the other side goes, yeah, but nobody's getting high on that shit, so after about the second joint nobody wants to smoke it because it's kind of just a generic bland profile. And the other problem is it is such a production workhorse, so many people have beat it. I mean, just cloned it and run it and cloned it and run it and cloned it and run it. And so back when I would see it heavily, like, years back, it was always in the most gross amounts you could ever see. A point where you just go, nobody wants that amount of Blue Dream. Why did you grow so much Blue Dream? Like, and it's not that really that they grew that many plants. It just yields that well. And so it just throws these like super symmetrical, for a sativa, it yields really well, for a fairly sativa leaning plant. But yeah, I worked in a dispensary. It was like 180,000 square foot indoor grow, and they would grow 6 and 7, 8 foot tall Blue Dream buds, plants. And it would literally have arm size single colas on the top of every one. And I mean, it's the only grow I've ever seen documented yielded over 3 light, 3 pounds per 1,000 watt.
I've never grown that much Blue Dream. I flower out a plant here and there just for a nostalgic taste.
Yep. It's on the terpene scale.
Okay, so let me move on to the second part of that before everybody forgets, though. Okay. How do you feel about Purple Punch?
I'm a lot more positive than I am about Blue Dream. Here's why. And this comes from a resin guy point of view, right? So Blue Dream does not make great hash. The funny thing about it is it's got tons of resin. It might throw down in the wash, but then it's got really waxy trichomes. So when you go to press it, there's tons of stalk, there's tons of wax, there's tons of loss. It doesn't make 6-star melt. I've never seen Blue Dream throw down pure, true 6-star, amazing melt, right? Now, Purple Punch is a different story. When it comes to wash, when it comes to resin, Purple Punch is one of those strains that as a breeder, it's going to make amazing crosses with amazing resin. And the beautiful thing about Purple Punch is that it's not that loud of a profile. So what you can do is you take a really terpy daddy and you hit it to a Purple Punch, and now you've got something that's worth talking about. It's kind of like Slurricane. Nobody's ever going to be like, I got 10 jars of Slurricane. You're never going to get enough of it. But it makes amazing crosses, amazing wash crosses, amazing hash crosses. And the beautiful thing is with both of those strains, the resin tends to break really evenly from the trichome stalk. So that's why people love to hash them, because though they're by themselves not the most terpy profiles, they're great for making crosses with. Yeah. And it's another one that, like, I don't run a ton, but I have made some Purple Punch crosses that were just amazing, amazing hash strains. But I don't run either cut. Why is Purple Punch the blue dream of the 21st century? Is that the implication? I'll go ahead and say what hasn't been said in this, and I'll address the elephant in the room.
I'm stubborn about it. I defend Blue Dream in those things. Like, I'll agree with you. It's not.
What are your thoughts on Purple Punch?
My thoughts on Purple Punch? I have nothing against Purple Punch at all.
Yeah.
I think I love the taste of Purple Punch, just like I love the taste of Blue Dream. But it's not because, and it's not.
I don't know that I love the taste of Blue Dream.
Now, it's not that it tastes good. It's not that the terps are high on it. It's just that specific flavor. It's nostalgic for me. It brings back good memories. And that's why I said I flower out a plant of it here or there just to have like a little bit of it, just so I can reach into that jar and like roll it up. But that was the other purpose of it too, was can I use this as a base to breed something special that I find with, to improve the potency, improve the flavor, take what I like about Blue Dream, but make it better, in my opinion.
Can I tell you the funniest part about this conversation with you right now?
Yeah.
Is that I sense a little shame in your voice.
Not at all.
I am, and I think it may come from.
It's because I hear it over and over again.
The stigma that exists.
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
There is a little bit of like, I love it, guys, and it's my
not thing, shame at all.
But
I know it's unpopular opinion.
No,
Right. But I also, have you ever bred with Blue Dream?
No.
Why?
I've never even had. Now, Purple Punch I've had in
mainly because other crosses. You have access to a lot more. I've
never worked with it at all.
Yeah, but you have access to what your favorite thing is, which is those heavy terp. Like obviously you're gonna go. I don't
fault you at all for having a strain that you love, even if it's an unpopular strain. And I think the thing about Blue Dream is that it has become a cultural thing within the head weed community, right? It's not, your shame doesn't come from you not feeling right about the fact that you love a strain. What I'm saying is there is a cultural thing of like shame towards people who love specifically Blue Dream.
If anything, the tiny amount of shame that I felt there was because me and my buddy, we have this funny long running thing. Like he'll make fun of me, like, "Yeah, you still got that Blue Dream," but he's got Purple Punch, and I'm like, "You're still running Purple Punch."
There it is. Like, you said it. I just said it first. I get it. Yeah. I get it. Like I said, Purple Punch is one of those things.
I equivalate them the same because Purple Punch does not get me fucked up. I think the flavor is way better on Purple Punch. Like you said, the resin is better, and I think that's a big part of it. It's heavy oil, glandular trichome.
It's a better oil to wax ratio in the trichome. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's a decent yielder, too. So it's pretty. It looks good. But they're kind of in that same ballpark, Good yielder. They've got their own original flavor, even if you don't like it or you do like it. One's got a heavy yield quality. The other one's got a heavy taste quality. And neither of them are really going to fuck you up.
Do you remember Sweet Tooth?
Yeah, I love Sweet Tooth.
The reason I didn't like Blue Dream was because it reminded me so much of Sweet Tooth. And I ran a ton of Sweet Tooth in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and the profiles are so similar. It's kind of like this just generic sweet. how I usually described it. I mean, like I've seen some blue. The thing about most of the Blue Dream flower I've seen is that the blueberry profile that is usually inherent to the flower doesn't always transfer to the finished weed. So, like with Blue Dream, a lot of the Blue Dream flower that I see is just kind of a generic, you know, sweet kind of profile. It's almost rare to see one that like you get a lot of that blueberry complexity that is there on the flower. Like when you grow it, it smells nice. It just, yeah, it just doesn't. I don't
Did
know.
you ever grow the blueberry muffin?
Not blueberry muffin. I've run a few phenos of blueberry years back and through the years here and there from different seed pops from DJ Short.
Okay.
But no, I do remember a strain back in, late 90s, early 2000s that they used to call the blueberry yum yum. It was super heavy around Atlanta. Ludacris wrote a song about it.
Yeah. Was
That
that
was
not just
very,
blueberry?
uh, it depends on who you ask and what you're talking about. Like,
Blueberry
yes, I
OG.
don't think it was an entirely unique strain, but I'm not sure if it was a DJ Short blueberry pheno. But it was one of those that was just it tasted like blueberry, just candy, like blueberry, almost blueberry muffiny, blueberry candy. The best of the blueberry line. Oh man, I don't know if I want to get into a hot take deep into 2 hours here, man. But I got
Okay,
it.
well, back through it.
I got it, man. The guy that wrote the book on breeding, while we're talking about blueberry, the man who wrote the book on cannabis breeding has also contributed one of the most hermaphroditic strains in the history of cannabis genetics. There are
That was a
so
safe
many.
way of putting it.
There are
Good
so many
job.
problems in blueberry that anybody that's ever worked with that strain in any capacity whatsoever would really go like. It's so funny when people ask me about Herms because that guy's been selling that strain for 40 years now, and every seed has a very high probability of having hermaphroditic traits, and he's blamed it on the tie. But in 40
That
years,
I feel like that's kind of fair. A
and,
little
and,
bit.
I,
I
and I,
haven't I think he took that from the blue tie, and I haven't grown the blue tie to say for specific, but I've grown a lot of ties, and they're known for hermaphrodism, right? So
yep.
I think that's kind of a fair blame, but at the same time, when you've been doing it for a long time, I feel like it's not only a goal, but a responsibility for modern cannabis to test your genetics and make sure it's stable for the home grower that can't afford to waste time for their medicine growing out in stable genetics.
Well, see, here's a big issue, right? Stable has changed. What stable meant through the late 90s, early 2000s meant that if I bought a pack of 10 seeds, those 10 seeds would generally all look the same. That was the term stable when I first started buying seeds. As of late, stable means they're not going to herm. This is tough, man, because one of my biggest pet peeves is the notion that we're going to solve the hermaphrodite problem by over inbreeding. So the notion that if instead of there just being all these F1s and F2s everywhere, if we had started and just done nothing but inbreed every one of these lines to an F10, there would be no herms anymore. The notion is that if you just work that line a little bit better, there's going to be no more herms. This is a plant that wants to breed.
You're never going to get rid of
Its
it.
natural inclination when it's stressed, especially late in life, is to breed. So the notion that you're going to over inbreed and make that problem just miraculously disappear, inbreeding is great for making a stable line of breeding plants. They look alike, they breed alike, right? We only have to look to dog breeding to realize what over inbreeding does to a gene pool, right? There's certain breeds of dog that you can't have around kids because they were bred to be white dogs with black spots and nothing else. So if we only focus on every filial generation of an inbreeding line, we're getting rid of the herms. We got rid of the herms, but now we've created something nobody cares to smoke. Because while you were focused on not having herms, you weren't paying any attention to all the other 150 other things that you need to look for in breeding a modern cannabis strain. So it's like, that's one beautiful thing. Nobody wants people to lose money because of herms. But we have to be better about explaining to people that the notion that that's ever going to just disappear, that any breeder is selling seeds that produces an absolute 0% herm ratio, it doesn't exist.
It does not exist.
It
I'm
doesn't
glad that
exist.
you went more in depth with that. Absolutely. But that's not to say that you can't breed for more stable
No,
genetics, like
absolutely,
you said.
absolutely. And it should always be, a number one priority in any breeding, because that's what the market dictates is necessary. You want plants that aren't going to throw male flowers and herm a whole room and ruin people's money. But the other side to that is, if I pop 200 seeds from assorted different breeders, I could probably make every one of those plants flip male flowers.
Oh, yeah.
Every one of them, which means that not necessarily you're lucky if it doesn't happen to you, but what I'm saying is, at the end of a plant stage, you have to just be diligent growing this plant indoors. Like, it's one of those things that, like, we're doing really unnatural things with the way we're forcing them to grow, the spectrums we're using, pruning techniques, with training techniques, with indoor lighting. So, like, the notion that you can breed a perfect strain that's going to hit every box, isn't going to herm, it's going to wash 5%, it's going to be all resin and no wax. Like, man, and it's one of those things that, like, as a breeder, you think about all of this. You want to make perfect selections. You want to do the right selection and make sure everything. And then what it comes down to is just having an eye. It's something you can't really teach. It's something you can't really tell somebody how to do. It's from looking at thousands and thousands of plants and finally having an eye to be able to see what you're not seeing, to see the potential in a plant, male plant, female plant, that's going to bring something that you haven't seen before. And that's, once you've seen 100,000 plants, I always tell people, biggest mistake a new grower will make is keeping around a plant they should have gotten rid of, because they haven't had that thing yet of, not every plant's a winner. Even in a large enough selection, you're going to kill some plants off. You're going to get rid of some plants. Any great grower has killed a couple plants along the way, both intentionally and unintentionally. And, one of the things that you have to do is you just have to say, look, if this plant's struggling, it's probably easier for you to start another plant or to have started 15% more plants, so that you can account for the fact that you're going to have to kill some of them.
Thank you.
And so many people drag those plants into flower, and they're like, maybe it's just genetics. Maybe it's just it doesn't like your feeding regimen, but just having a less discerning eye about plants and just saying, you know what, some of them are going to die. And if they're not healthy, sometimes it's easier to get rid of them than it is to drag a sick plant into the garden, into flower. And now you've brought all kinds of other issues and pests
Right.
and pathogens and all kinds. It's a sick plant, anything can attack it now.
Thank you for saying that. I know we were talking about that the other day. You really become ruthless when you're doing a big hunt and you're looking for something very specific, or even just trying to pull things apart. You don't have time, if you're going to find that something special, to be going through these and putting up with the runts or putting up with the heavy mutations that aren't worth a shit in veg and can't keep up with anything else. It's I popped a 12 pack and I had two that were really runny, and I just pulled them out right away. And everybody's like, well, why didn't you see? They might have been females. I'm like, I do not have time for that shit anymore, because at the end of the day, what I want is I want that plant that excelled. That's the one that I'm going to keep around. Not only is it a great smoke, but it's got to grow well too. I don't
Yep.
care how good the smoke is. If it takes me fucking 4 months to veg it out,
Yep.
nah, I'm good.
Yep. There's so much of that, man, that, like, as a grower who's done it a few times, you kind of come to understand that what you want is a plant that from the minute it hits water. It has the healthiest and most beautiful life it can, right? So I see all the time, because I work around hash makers, I work with hash growers, I work with breeders, or other breeders who focus on hash. I ask people all the time, like, what's important to you in your grow, right, is probably not going to be important to somebody else in their selection. So when I'm picking for what makes a great hash strain, it's almost never what somebody else is thinking. It's almost always like, what do I feel? Like, what am I the most passionate about? Because if I'm putting passion into every selection, into every thought, into everything that I'm doing in the garden, at the end of the day, the results are going to show from that. And the plants that people pick up and run are going to be grown from minute one from what I thought was the best that I could pick.
All right, that's about all the time that we have for today. Terp, thank you so much for joining me, man. That was an amazing podcast. We got so much information out there. We had a giveaway during the show. Big Bad John and Stone Stew from our Patreon membership won 2 packs that you donated. Block Knocker, Ice Cream Man, Grape Sundae crossed with Lucky Charms. Congratulations, guys. And then we will be having Do or Dab tomorrow. Hopefully Terpene can join us. I will send you an invite tomorrow, man. Going to be about 5 p.m. If you can make it, come in. If you can't, no big deal. But we will be giving away the rest of the genetics that you hand us. And I know I'm going to be hitting you up later to get some seeds off you as well. Where can everybody find your genetics right now?
If you're looking for seeds, terpene.com, www.terpfi3nd.com. The best place to find weed pictures is on my Reddit subreddit. You can go to my Instagram, which is at the moment at terpfi3nd, terpfiend. And you can find my link tree there that's got all my podcast links. And if you didn't get enough hearing me talk tonight, we'll be doing another one tomorrow night. We do 2 a week. But yeah, seeds, go to terpene.com. Still running a 420 sale through the weekend.
Thank you so much. I vibed with you. I love how much detail you went into everything. And I appreciate your view on cannabis, for sure.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you having me.
Till next time, guys. Have a good night.
Take it real.